lindões, Kreuser aqui, e o vídeo de hoje é uma entrevista com Tim Miller, que é o mesmo diretor do primeiro Deadpool, e também com a Jennifer Yuh Nelson, que foi diretora de Kung Fu Panda 2, e agora eles estão juntos no projeto da segunda temporada de Love, Death and Robots. E aí eu tive essa oportunidade de conversar com eles, e foi muito legal porque a gente conseguiu falar diversos pontos sobre a segunda temporada e também como é feita a produção da série e como que é a decisão, justamente por ser episódios antológicos. Eu tirei várias dúvidas que eu tinha quando eu assisti a primeira temporada, inclusive. Lembrando que a série estreou nessa sexta-feira, dia 14, na Netflix, e já tem a terceira temporada confirmada, então se você já assistiu tudo, querendo mais, fica tranquilo que vai ter mais. E também tem vídeo aqui no canal, hein? Eu falei sobre os episódios, falei sobre os meus episódios favoritos, então não deixa de conferir, eu vou deixar o link aqui na descrição. Mas antes de conferir a entrevista, não esquece de se inscrever aqui no canal e clicar no sininho para receber notificação para quando tiver um vídeo novo, que eu sempre trago as novidades dos filmes e das séries aqui para vocês o quanto antes, vocês sabem. E entrevistas legais como essa, espero que vocês gostem, então fiquem com ela. Love, Death and Robots was a success in the premiere. What do you think has changed or matured from the first to the second season?
Good question. I think one of the important things for everybody was to make sure that we gave people what they loved about the first season and the second season and keep all that geek fan joy alive. But we also wanted to push the stories into even more a complex and layered way, so you get more depth to the flavor, so to speak.
You said changed and matured, and Jennifer is definitely more mature.
A little bit.
So you see, I think a slightly more sophisticated grouping of stories because she's more sophisticated than me.
Although I love the action. I love like massive violent action, so that's all fine and good.
Maybe you don't want to be sophisticated. Yeah.
This second season had a strong theme about human survival in each of the episodes. How is the theme defined for this season, or is it something defined for the episode?
I really feel like this show is anti-themed. It's hard in Hollywood. People want to group things together in a nice package, but I really made an effort when we designed this show. I didn't want to be limited by certain types of stories or ideas, so I made the show deliberately be big enough that we could kind of do anything. And I think this season you'll see things that we wouldn't have tried last season, like the one I directed, The Drowned Giant. I wouldn't have tried that in season one, but it fits right next to all the really weird, violent shit going on in season two, even though it's not violent. It's just weird.
Yeah, I guess the theme would be variety, because we want to make sure that everything has like a little taste of this or a taste of that, and there's contrast between all these different episodes. I think first season, people thematically were saying the theme was cats, but I guess the second one, I don't know.
But do you believe that indirectly this theme relates to what the world is experiencing?
I think it's inevitable, and that the world is what it is, and the last year has been quite a challenge for everyone. But a lot of these stories, I think, are a bit timeless. A lot of the science fiction world is about their allegory for a lot of the human condition. So it may apply to the world as it is now simply because it just applies generally to what the challenges are.
But you don't want the show to feel like when people watch it 5 years from now to feel like the jokes don't work because, you know, they were all about Donald Trump. As much as I want to make fun of Donald Trump, you don't want to date the show that way.
And how does the management of different studios and different stories works?
Really, it's just a quest of finding people with a specialization, directors and studios that have a particular style. Maybe one is a great stop motion studio, one is incredible with realism, maybe one is just out there and just different entirely. But again, that contrast and variety was something that we try to seek out. And also if they're just really cool people.
There's a lot of smaller boutique types of studios around the world that are doing really brilliant work. It makes it much more international. Like you might not find a studio like ILM or as big as that in some place like Scotland, for instance. I could be insulting some Scottish studio that is gigantic. I don't know. You might not find that, but you can find a studio of 100 people or 60 people that do really great work. That small groups of really talented artists can come together, and they don't need to have some kind of giant infrastructure and do big feature films. They can work on projects that are more interesting creatively because they don't have some giant infrastructure to support, which kind of leads you down a path to mediocrity, I think, at times.
And Tim, in an interview with Collider a few years ago, you even commented on the desire to make bigger episodes or expand the universe of some of them. Do you still have that desire, or do you have a project under development in that direction?
We would like to do that, but only if it feels it should be that way. You know what I mean? It's not like we're going, hey, we want to do films, so we're going to find a film length project. It's more like if we find a project that feels like it should be a film, we'll do it that way. That said, I'm pretty excited about maybe trying a novella length, which is like 100 pages, which would be, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 minutes. That's not a feature, but it's some other different length, because I feel like it really has an influence on the type of stories you tell and how you tell them. It's good to experiment. We've had years and years of feature-length films. It's time to do some different things.
And Jennifer, you directed Kung Fu Panda 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a film that speaks to all audience, from children to an adult audience, while Love, Death and Robots is an animation for the adult audience. What are the main differences in the direction and creative process of a more general animation and an animation for the adult audience? And Tim, be my guest to answer this question too.
I think that it's a very different job as far as what you're trying to achieve for your audience. With something like Kung Fu Panda, it's about, you're supposed to make sure you don't scare the kids out of the theaters. This is definitely not for kids. It is intended as being for adults. And because of that, the writing is different. The complexity is different. You're dealing with themes and ideas, concepts, visuals that are simply too intense for kids. It's intended that way. That's what this is for. This is not for children. And for me, it's incredibly liberating to sort of approach stories as if they were a live action production, one that's intended for all audiences that are not necessarily a family audience. So it's fun that way.
And you can say fuck whenever you want. You can have a character say fuck 5 times in a row if you want, and nobody is going to say anything different. I think when you see the story that Jennifer did for the future seasons of Love, Death and Robots, this couldn't be not true, but I think that short is so violent because you had so much time in the world of family entertainment that it was like an explosion of pent up.
You have to have balance in all things.
Yes.
And you work with different types of animation, including studio with actors, such as the Michael B. Jordan episode. What is the biggest challenge in directing these different types of animation?
I don't know. I don't think it's really that fundamentally different. I went from animation to live action, back to animation again. You're trying to tell a good story with different tools. Michael was just here, he just left because he did an interview. It's great to be able to interact with an actor, but if it's not an actor, you're interacting with an animator who is controlling a character, so they're kind of the actor. I tend to focus on the script. That's what I worry about. Is the story good? And then the tools that we use to tell it are kind of secondary. They each have their little nuances, but it's the same process.
And if you don't mind, could you tell me your 3 favorite episodes from this season and why?
You can't choose between the children. You make them feel bad. I gotta say, a personal thing that I like is that we haven't had a stop motion short before, and to be able to have a stop motion piece this season has been really fun, especially since it's such a contrast. The sort of the physical sort of limited way that you can deal with stop motion has been really a joy to see.
We do studio reviews, and since everything is on Zoom now, we'll show the work to the whole studio. I always watch people watching the show on Zoom, you know, you can stay in the screen and watch the people. And the minute the stop motion short comes on, people begin smiling. They all go, oh, it's like, it has so many childhood memories, warm feelings, even though the story is not that. It's not for kids. You get that feeling, and it's one of those things where it's great to see the kind of love that people have for that. I would say that I love different stories for different reasons. I mean, Ice is the one that Robert Valley did. It's just fucking beautiful, and I love 2D animation, and it's an amazing example of that. The one that Michael's in, Life Hutch, is this really contained military sci-fi with a psychological edge. The one that Jennifer did is, I think, a really interesting science fictional future that tackles some hard issues that humanity may be faced with someday. It takes a lot of courage. Like when she chose that story, I'm like, are you fucking shitting me? I would not touch that story with a 10-foot pole. The only story that I really don't like is the one I did, because you get sick of your own work.
The reason why it's so cool, the one you did, is because it's so not what people would expect you to.
So not what people expect.
They won't look at that and think, oh yeah, that's a Tim Miller one. They would not think that.
And why did this season have far fewer episodes? Or was it a decision to split up for more seasons and confirm the third, for example?
It takes a long time to make animation of this quality. In fact, I'd say it took about the same amount of time to do the first season as the second and third. It's just a matter of, we wanted to get it out to people sooner so that people wouldn't have to wait so long. No one knew how long it took on the first one because they didn't know what they were waiting for.
Yeah, it's true. And then the clock starts ticking, and it was simply a case of, hey, can we get it out faster? And this was the only solution. I'm really curious to see what the fans think, because it was only towards the end of the whole production that you watch them all together. And then 90 minutes of the season, they're just like, it's over so quick. It feels crazy how quickly the time goes by with the shorts versus the 180 minutes, which still felt enjoyable to me, but it was definitely towards the end of it, you know, you're having some kind of creative exhaustion from watching all the different styles. Whereas I felt like I still wanted more at the end of 90 minutes.
Well, the good news is there's more coming. Yeah. So that's the little thing that people can look forward to, that we're busy working on the third season right now. Some episodes are done already, so we're just excited to share those too.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at both of these two seasons. They were one season for quite a while, and then we decided to split them up. So the mix is as important as the individual stories, and the mix was chosen to have a little bit of everything. I'm hoping that in a short while, people will be able to watch 2 and 3 back to back.
Thank you so much. I really, really love this second season.
Yay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. What was your favorite episode? Do you have one?
I love the Christmas episode and the children's episode, the third episode.
Pop Squad. That's Jennifer's.
That's mine.
Yeah, I love so much.
Cool, thank you.
How did you feel about it being shorter?
I love it that the season was shorter, because even though it is an anthological series, sometimes we see 18 episodes and leave it for later.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So thank you so much. I love the season.